Welcome to the CareGiver reality show with your host, David Levy, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune into today's edition of CareGiver Reality with your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. It's Tuesday at Drive Time. I'm your host, David Levy, and this is the CareGiver Reality Hour. I'm very pleased to be bringing it to you this evening, and I would certainly like to thank my good friend and associate, Marcia Teal, for stepping in and helping over the last couple of weeks when I was not able to be here because of certain health issues, which now are on the back burner. But nonetheless, she was a very gracious hostess, and I hope going forward that you will be able to see a lot more. I'm kind of contemplating with her doing a co-hosting arrangement, and hopefully that'll work. You're listening to us tonight on CareGiverReality.com, on WWNN 1470 AM and WWNNRadio.com, as well as AM2.TV. And to everybody out there, I hope you're having a great Tuesday. We've been, I was talking to Freddie earlier, I think this is our 100th show. We've been on since the middle of April, sometime back in 2013, and we've been here religiously every week. And I do have some announcements to make tonight. One of is that I will be taking a break over the next month or two on doctor's orders and my orders. I just need to take some time and let my health rebound and build back a little more stamina. But certainly we'll be back. Bigger and better than ever. I'm talking with Freddie about revamping a new show that encompasses even more than what we've been doing in the past, although we've been doing a lot. And one of the things is I was looking over the past shows, we've brought you a lot of things, a lot of information, a lot of great tips, a lot of things that you may not have been aware of, both as a caregiver, as somebody who just might be part of that great booming group that is aging or becoming more mature, whichever way you'd like to look at it. But nonetheless, we still have all of the issues that we have and probably more. Before I get into it, one of the things I was just discussing was today's Wall Street Journal. For those of you that read it either online or get it, I'm still one of those historical folks that loves to sit in front of a piece of paper and read it. But today, the front page of the Personal Journal in living color was a picture of the significant others of Alzheimer's. And these are significant others that are both spouses, significant others. There was a gay couple that were featured. There's a father and son that are taking care of a mother. And each and every one of them said it's the most complicated thing that they've ever done. And, you know, through the past 100 shows over these past 2 years, the one thing that I have tried to make crystal clear is that caregiving is a role. It does not come with training, that 15% of what we do is clinical, but 85% is the practical problem solving of understanding how to deal with a loved one, how to deal with the system, what do you need to be prepared. Over this past 2 years, you've heard people come in, and I'll be discussing it, who needed to turn to a significant other when their loved one could no longer provide any kind of emotional support for them. We had firestorms about things called emotional divorce. I'm going to touch back on some of that when we had on Vicki Kind, who was the great bioethicist we had on about a year ago. People like Barry Sinrod, who was sitting in that chair right across from me, begging for somebody in the medical profession to take his wife, who had slowly reached living in a fetal position due to Parkinson's disease over an extended period of time. And the only thing the medical profession could do was say, ethically, do no harm, do not hasten. They went back to the Hippocratic Oath. And Hippocrates can be very hypocritical, not to be cute and play on words. But it's not a condition of your medical license, nor is it a condition of graduating from medical school. It's an ethical standard, similar to what the Ten Commandments might be. And they're guideposts to live by, but they're not etched in stone. And one of the great issues that we're seeing coming forward in this day and age is, what do we do when somebody reaches a point in their aging and illness process where there is no quality of life, where all they're doing is remaining in an immobile position, in a bed, in an institution, at home, creating the agony of watching somebody live like this for the family and those around them who are loving and supporting and spending their dollars and their emotional time and effort to try and bring to their loved one some semblance of what they would hope to have. But we all know that if they could return for but 5 minutes and see what they're doing and what's happening to them, they would say, please. And this is not a religious or an ethical or a moral discussion. This is strictly a practical one. Most people laying in a fetal position in an institution or in home and obligating the world to try and care for them when there's no longer, not a reason to, but you have to wonder why. What is the end point to all of this? They would say, please, let me go quickly into the night. But yet, the concept of, call it assisted suicide or whatever it may be, while it's gaining traction, it still has not reached a point where the American public or the American political system or legal system or medical system is ready to accept the fact that life has quantity to it. And one of the things it has to have, besides the quantity to exist, is the quality to enjoy it. And quality of life is something that we all seek every day for ourselves and for others. So this Alzheimer's article, which is not only the entire front page, but page 2 of today's journal, is worth seeing whether you go and pick it up online or you still get out and get a copy of it, because it lays out in very, very clear terms what we have tried to explain over these last 2 years, that the burden of caregiving is an immense responsibility. People undertake it without even recognizing the causes and the reasons. It's a role, all right? It's not a disease. We don't catch caregiving. We acquire the responsibility because a loved one can no longer take care of themselves and require us or others in the family to make sure that they're taken care of properly. But it reaches a point where it can also take down the caregiver. You know, part of the last couple of years we had on, one of our first guests was Dr. Mark Brody, who's here in the South Florida area, a tremendous principal investigator and researcher who's now involved in further ongoing research. We've been listening over this past week or two to some of the small studies that have been coming out regarding the ability to possibly slow down a little bit the progression of Alzheimer's. And I'm playing on Alzheimer's this evening only because it's so significant. It's constantly in the news. It's the A word that everybody is so afraid of. And yet it is an issue that is confronting so many families. We have 5.3 million people in the United States that we feel have been diagnosed with one form of dementia called Alzheimer's. There are probably just as many, that have temporal frontal lobe, which is the result of an accident, cerebral vascular insult, whatever it may be. We don't have to get into the technicalities. But dementia is very widespread, and it's very pervasive, and it takes away and sucks out of someone the ability to be part of the life scene that you have always known them to be part of. And it's very, very difficult. It's difficult to manage, even in institutional settings. It's difficult. And now we see the cost of this kind of care escalating, and we wonder, how are we going to be able to do this? Where are we going to be able to do it? All right. Assisted living dementia, and Marcia Teal, who was such a gracious host for me over the last week or two, who is a tremendous marketing individual and works for Arden Court, which I consider to be the gold standard out there in assisted living dementia. And kudos to Marcia for all she does. All right. Part of what we're thinking about doing when we come back is making sure that people that are involved in dealing with Alzheimer's can also have a sense of purpose, direction, the opportunity to laugh once in a while, besides useful tips and helpful ways to approach what these kinds of responsibilities bring with it. Dr. Brody is involved in a study now trying to determine whether early on, if we can see it in folks that maybe have just started to show a little sign of dementia, or maybe even haven't shown it, but have a genetic predisposition because it's run rampant in their family. All right. Are there ways to slow it down or stop it? We now know that the proteins that we always talked about, tau and beta amyloid, which causes the plaquing, excuse me, are a key part of when we see it, it helps to define the disease. But now we have to figure out is what can we do to eliminate it. I don't know how many of you saw the program that was on PBS last night regarding the research that was done in cancer and how all of that grew up in Sidney Farber and the Dana-Farber Institute in Boston Children's Hospital, and how they used the polio virus to take on one of the nastiest forms of cancer that there was, a glioma, which can double inside of your brain every 2 weeks. But they figured out a way to use the polio vaccine after they took away some of its threat to actually trigger the body's own immune system so it would attack the cancer, because typically it couldn't see it. And that's why the cancer grew the way it did. Well, hopefully we'll be able to find things for dementia that will allow us to give quality of life back or slow down the progress so that the family, as well as the person who has the disease, can have an extended life with quality to it. If you recall, when we first started, probably around the 6 or 7 month mark, we started to listen to a doctor by the name of David Hilfiker, who was a general practitioner in the Washington, D.C. area, who began to blog what happens when the lights go out and described the difficulty in knowing that he had symptoms that appeared to be Alzheimer's, but he was tested by the National Institute of Health and was declared not to have it. But shortly thereafter, a good friend who was a neuropsychologist reevaluated the testing that was done and said, yes, you do have it. And he even said at that time there was a sense of relief in knowing that at least he knew what he was dealing with, rather than just what were oblique symptoms that appeared to be or could be but couldn't be confirmed. About October of last year, he was still going strong. He decided that his Alzheimer's, or whatever he had, was not progressing, and that there was no longer anything further that he could give to the public in his blogs that would be illuminating about the progression of his disease. And now he's getting ready to do some more blogging, but not about Alzheimer's, but just about the whole series of constructive aging. And as a gerontologist myself, healthy aging is really what we're all about, and part of what we want to recast into the new show going forward that will be coming back on the air hopefully in another 2 months. I've got to take a break. We've got to redesign some things. Freddie and I, and my producer, who I am eternally indebted to, have some scheming that we have to do and to figure out some of the things that we want to do. But right now, we're going to take a break, and I'll be back in a few minutes, and we'll continue this discussion. Thank you.
Grab a pen, because you're going to be given some really important information and a phone number to call that will really help you.
Did you know that the law allows people to protect assets and qualify for Medicaid? Did you know that Medicaid can pay for home care, assisted living, and nursing home care at even the best facilities and with even the best of agencies? Hi, I'm Scott Solkoff, and I write the book on Florida elder law. My father and I have authored the leading textbook on Florida elder law, now in its 14th edition. I lecture, I train, I teach other lawyers and judges all about the law, and I can teach you too. I love teaching and advising my elderly clients and their families. Good elder law planning can save the family nest egg and result in a tremendous difference in quality of care. Board-certified elder law attorneys, I'm board certified, are specialists in planning for incapacity, wills, and trusts, and protecting assets against the cost of long-term care. Come in and see me. I charge $250 for a 2-hour meeting, and I don't think I've ever had one person tell me it wasn't worth many times that amount. We don't do free meetings, which often are nothing more than a sales pitch from someone who really needs the business. Call me at 561-733-4242. I've been in business for over 20 years doing just this work, and am certified as a specialist by the Florida Bar. Set an appointment. That's 561-733-4242. Come see me in my Delray Beach office on Atlantic Avenue. You just have to call my office at 561-733-4242, and I'm Scott Solkoff. Let me help you protect your assets, qualify for Medicaid or VA benefits, have greater peace of mind knowing that it's been done, and a higher quality of life. So again, call me, Scott Solkoff, at 561-733-4242, and remember, call your parents, not just to tell them about Scott Solkoff, just to tell them that you love them and appreciate them. I'm going to call my parents now.
The hiring of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based on advertisements alone. You can call our office at 561-733-4242 to get more information about our qualifications and expertise. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back, and thank you very much for patiently sitting through the Scott Solkoff commercial. He's a great attorney, a good personal friend. He called over this past weekend, see how I was doing. He was up in Charlotte where he was addressing, I think, the Academy of Special Needs Attorneys who deal with especially families that have children that have special needs and really need to think about the long-term planning and how they're going to handle things. Many times it's as a result of an injury or a birth defect or some other reason, and there are settlements involved, and it's very tricky, interesting area of the law. He's one of the real experts in it. He and his father, Jerome, his dad started the Elder Bar 30 years ago here in Florida. They write the West Law books on elder law, and if anybody needs great elder law information, advice, and great services, Scott's the person to see, and that number, which you heard repeated, was 561-733-4242. Give him a call. Tell him I told you to call. You'll be welcome, and the information and the services that you can gain from it will indeed help to put your mind a little more at ease that you've done good, careful planning. You know, one of the things that I'll be doing tomorrow, as I always do, is my Wednesday morning support group. And I want to thank them because over the years, that group has been so instrumental in helping to guide me in the kinds of things that we discuss here on the Caregiver Reality Hour. One of the people who's been a loyal and devoted listener, Eleanor, I know you're listening tonight. I know you're going in for cataract surgery tomorrow, and so good luck with that. I'll be following you on the 23rd. I have to have a cataract removed as well. And I must tell you, folks, I never looked forward to surgery, but I am looking forward to having this cataract out. There's nothing more confounding and confusing than when you can't get your eyesight to work the right way. And this has been a heck of a health year for me, but I can't wait to get that part of it behind me and get on with the things that I really want to do, the programs that I really want to develop, and the things that I want to bring to the American public. You know, part of what this is all about is over the years, I've heard from folks that I meet on the street that say, I heard your program last night, I love it. I said, how come you don't call in? And one of the things is because it's so interesting, I don't want to interrupt. You know what it is you want to tell us, and I don't want to bring my particular story in at the moment. I want to hear what you have to say. Well, one of the things that I've done, because I really would like to hear from our audience out there, wherever you may be, I've set up an email, info@caregiverreality.com. That's info@caregiverreality. That's 2 words with a double R in the middle, and the caregiver, beginningareality.com. And I really would like to hear whether or not you've enjoyed the show. All I need is a yes, I have. If you've got information that you'd like to impart, if there's ideas that you have for what you'd like to see going forward, because we want to expand our horizon. We're going to concentrate always on the family caregiver because there's 50 to 70 million of you who need help. I'm not the only person that can help. I've been in this business for almost 28 years now. I've studied it. I'm a great believer that, as I've said to you from the beginning of the show and from the beginning of this show, I think that the frustration that caregivers go through is not understanding the role that they've been put in, what it is they're supposed to do, when they're allowed to raise their hand and say, okay, I can't do anymore. What do I have to do now to reach for some help? How do I afford it? Where do I find it? How do I plan? What makes sure that things will go the way I need them to? And, you know, over the years, or over the last 2 years, as I said, we brought you a lot of different people, one of which was my good friend Herb Brodsky, whose wife was in a dementia facility, and along the way he came to me and he said, you know, I'm really lonely. And once again, I said to him, you know, there's nothing wrong with having another person in your life, somebody that you can go have a pizza with, somebody that you can share things with. I know how frustrating it is to see your wife slowly diminishing, and to have no one to share the things that you always shared, the things that you both cherished and loved. And it's okay to have somebody else in your life. I said, I'm not giving you permission to have an affair. You don't need that. You can go do that on your own. But there's nothing wrong with what we called an emotional divorce, the ability to put another person in your life to take away some of that emptiness and loneliness and have an opportunity to restore. Because believe me, if the loved one that no longer can communicate with you could come back for 5 minutes and see the effort, energy, time, emotions, etc., that have been expended towards their care, and the fact that they can no longer give back the things that they used to share and care about, they would say, for gosh sakes, go ahead and do that. I never wanted you just to stand here at my bedside and not have any form of a life waiting for me to pass away and then going on through whatever aspect of widowhood that you might, and then hopefully find somebody. You need to put somebody in your life now. And when we had discussed the whole aspect of emotional divorce, as I said earlier, with Vicki Kind, who is a phenomenal bioethicist, and it raised a real firestorm out there, as I indicated earlier, with a lot of people who thought it was cheating on your spouse, but it isn't. We're not talking about cheating. We're talking about the ability to insert into a very lonely life the opportunity to have another person, significant or not, that you can share things with. And I want you to know, after 28 years of doing this and advising people, I have seen that aspect of things work time and time again. And to see a smile come back on their face because they had somebody they could share and care about things with. And then after Herb was on, the lady friend that he found, Lynn, came on the show to explain that she had been through widowhood twice, and that when she met Herb, and she was very devoted to his wife, and they would both go to the facility together, and she always cared, and she put his wife in front of even many of the things that she didn't have to. And it showed me that the concept of allowing somebody into your life, even before the one that you're married to or was the person that was above all others, hasn't passed away, but yet can no longer be the person they were. is perfectly okay. And nobody says you have to, but it's an avenue that's available. No different than when Barry came on, as I mentioned earlier, and talked about death with dignity and the opportunity to end a totally non-productive life, and how he ran from pillar to post trying to figure out who might accommodate it. And it was too late to go to Amsterdam, and it was too late to consciously go to places that might allow it to happen in Oregon and Washington State and Vermont and others. And even to this day, he had an editorial in the Palm Beach Post, I'd say about a week ago, where death with dignity is a crusade that he's on now. He was a great author. He still is. He wrote a number of children's books. Oprah used to have him on the show all the time. And now he's taking that time and talent and devoting it to a cause that he has lived and deeply believes in as a caregiver and as a survivor. And I give him all the credit in the world. He and I will be meeting again later on this week. I'm trying to see what I can do. He's found another person in his life, and I'm so happy for him. But Barry is remarkable and unflinching when it comes to the cause of being able to have death with dignity. And it's so terribly, terribly important. And I want all of our listeners to know that not only do I support him, but I encourage an open discussion on this subject, and it should not be contained by politics. And those that believe in it can pursue it, and those that have religious or other objections, you go on pursuing your life exactly the way you need to as a caregiver and elsewise. Nobody is sitting here and dictating, but the flexibility in being a caregiver and having the opportunity to pursue things like that is terribly important. And when you take something like the Wall Street Journal today and you read the stories about the folks that they have interviewed, you see and hear over and over again, I was lost. I don't know what to do. My life is all consuming with this role. And with 50 to 70 million people out there, and gosh only knows how many worldwide, we're in the hundreds of millions of caregivers who go through the role and take on the responsibility. But nobody has ever shown them the light, shown them the way, shown them how they might perform what they need to do. And I'm not just talking about bedpan patrol. We all understand the clinical needs that are required. But how do you get on? How do you survive caregiving? And especially now that we realize that more and more with the changes in the healthcare laws, with the changes in the ability, I mean, we're watching long-term care insurance go away. Most of the big providers have pulled back. Many have gone into bankruptcy or are being under conservatorship up in Pennsylvania under the auspices of the Attorney General up there in the Department of Insurance. Many of you that have long-term care insurance know that you see your rates going up, your benefits being reduced, and the practical aspect of it was never properly designed. All right, it assumed that we were going to retire at 65, take a couple of cruises, play golf, and at 72 we'd be dead. And that maybe there would be a small percentage that needed the benefit, would wind up in a nursing home where there wasn't even assisted living at that particular point in time, or needed care at home. And now what do we see? We see that the typical age has raised to almost 80. Women, 85. If you reach 70, you're going to be 85. Men, you get to 70, you're going to be more than likely 78 to 83. I mean, women are just a little more resourceful, but we have millions that are going to be 100 by the end of this decade. And in an aging population, we need to be able to provide for ourselves. We need to be able, nobody ever thought that we would be living as long as we are. Nobody thought that we would be encountering the illnesses that we do. We all thought that the American medical system, which is certainly very commendable, would turn around and medicalize aging, where we kind of jumped over Darwin. It isn't survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most medicated. But how long can we keep that up? We see what's going on now. People that have hepatitis. How can the system afford a $100,000 drug? Well, many argue, look what it would cost if we didn't treat them and they went into ongoing medical care, required a liver transplant, what have you. But we're seeing that the cost of medicine is going up. And did we prepare? Did we think about the fact that it would take a third of our budget just for our health care needs? And who knows where it's going? Right now, we're looking at things like accountable care. You can call it Obamacare, whatever you want. However, trying to get the medical industry to understand that we can't live any longer with fee-for-service, although most doctors will tell you that it's very difficult to fit into a bundle with others and decide how a fixed payment is going to be allocated and how that's all going to unfold. I don't know. Nobody knows. And we'll continue to fight over what is quality health care, how do we deliver it. But in the meantime, you, the family caregiver, you, the family with the responsibility, still has somebody at home that needs to be taken care of 7/24. You're the eyes and ears. It's not the patient that goes in and says, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. It's the caregiver. Unfortunately, we don't have the time on the doctor's side because of reimbursement to be heard. I tell my caregivers, go in with a list. If you can't get it all out in words, leave it and say, I'd like you to get back to me and tell me whether or not these things are coming about, whether or not we can do them. Do I need to stay on these meds? Do I have to take the same dosages? What can I do? Where can I find help? And when the caregiver says to the doctor, what about me? What about what I'm going through? And you get a stare that says, well, I don't know. I never took a caregiving class in medical school. I never, in my nursing programs, had anything that told me about the family caregiver. I can understand it, and believe me, in today's world, where I meet an awful lot of healthcare professionals who are facing caregiving for themselves, they go, wow, not only didn't I ever learn about it, but when it happens to you individually, anything that you learned really kind of falls by the wayside. I know. I've been a family caregiver for many, many years, and I'm the one that wrote the book on non-clinical family caregiving and how to get through it all. But I will tell you that when it comes to the issues of me dealing with my wife from my role as a caregiver, not as a husband, it's just as frustrating. It's just as confounding. I lose my way. I need to ask others, and that's what's so important about support groups. I get from them as much as I think that they get from me, because I'm no different. I may be the facilitator, but I'm just as much a caregiver, and I am so deeply indebted to all of the people who over the years have been part of those groups. And even today, while the journal talks about at a number of universities having a support group once a month, my caregivers will tell you, if they don't have a support group at least once a week, they lose so much in the intervening time period. The camaraderie, the support, the confidentiality, the respect, and all of the standard rules about caregiving and support groups go out the window about. You don't talk about it outside of the group. You don't go anywhere that somebody isn't there to facilitate it. My groups have become families. They rely on one another. They call one another. If one of them isn't feeling well, the other one is there for them. And when I say one-on-one, I'm talking about 5-on-1, 6-on-1. When I was just sick and had to have surgery a few weeks ago, all of a sudden arrived at my door from one of my local favorite restaurants called Aladdin's Eatery was a gift card from the group so that we could just call in and order what we wanted. And they didn't have to do that, but that's what a family caregiver support group is all about, and it doesn't make a difference. Everybody's there to support everybody else. I've got about 20 minutes left. I'm going to take another break right now, and I'll be back. I want to lay out some things that are going on, and so this is David Levy, and I'll be back with you in another minute or two. Thank you.
family caregiver. Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back. And, one of the things I do want to say is thank you to Paul. Paul and I have made up our minds that we had a couple of different directions to go in. He's pursuing more of the mental health aspect of things, addiction, drug recovery, etc., and the care that's related to that. I wish him all the best. He and I are still very close friends. His wife and his role as a caregiver is deeply embedded, and we reach for one another to help one another out, because that's what good friends who are involved do. And I wish him all the best. I'm going to be pursuing a couple of things that are pet projects of mine that we'll be bringing back in terms of the new show going forward. And I must tell you, all of this would have never happened had I not met Freddie Santori, who's my producer. Had he not said to me one day after I met him, "Why don't you come on the Freddie Fix-It show," which he was doing when he was first getting started, and talk a little bit about caregiving, and look where it all went from there. And I'm deeply indebted to him and looking forward to a lot of different projects that he and I have in mind that will bring more caregiver information, hopefully advice and help to you, the family caregiver, and to widen the dimension of who we're talking to and the kinds of information and help and guidance that we think we can bring. One of the great areas, and by the way, I want to repeat that email address, info@caregiverreality.com, info@caregiverreality.com, I would really like to hear from our audience out there whether or not you want to see this program go forward and what you think we can do to make it more meaningful, more useful, more helpful, so that when I take my little break and do a little bounce back, that I can come back and bring to you going forward the kinds of things that you feel will be useful and helpful. As I've said, my caregiver groups constantly keep me informed because they're out there every day with their loved ones, and they see the change in the system. They see the frustration with what's going on. Those are the things they come back to the group and discuss. And from that, it allows me to use their knowledge and their experience and the things that they are going through to stay on the leading edge of what is happening in caregiving out there, so that we can bring it to you in an easy to understand, digestible form. One of the things that I'll be pursuing in this little gap of time is something that I call the Care Integrator. I'm very, very excited about it. My collaborator on my book on practical problem solving, the Caregiver Manual, Brenda Bryant, who is a phenomenal editor and sounding board and expert that I have relied upon, she and I have developed over the last 3 or 4 years something called the Care Integrator. And it is somebody who has been either, or was, or wants to be both. They may have been a teacher, they may have come from a variety of disciplines. It could be clinical, they could have been a home certified nursing aide, whatever. but are cross-trained in a program that we have put together that comes in many versions, including a highly sophisticated professional version for social workers and psychologists who want to really understand the nuts and bolts of non-clinical caregiving and add it to their practice, but allows one of the big frustrations in the caregiving, the masses that are out there, is the frustration of not having a clear career track. And I feel that this care integrator, which allows, with this cross-training, the individual to go in and not only assess what are the patient's needs, but to support the caregiver and understand what it is that they need, to use themselves as a sounding board for the caregiver, to be the first point of contact for the caregiver. One of the reasons that we see costs the way they are is because caregivers, when they burn out and don't know what to do, one of the easier things to do is to dial 911. And many times, with the frustration and the burnout, having the paramedics come and say, Mom, my wife, whatever, is having a very difficult time, and you know that the paramedics, for the most part, will take them to the ER, and that's a very, very expensive way in America to get some respite, when you could call the caregiver integrator, or the person that I'm talking about here tonight, all right, and they're your first point of contact. They can help you work through a problem. They can go back to this clinical bundle, this group from the medical side, and decide what's the most cost-effective way to deal with the patient while they deal with the caregiver. Maybe you don't need 911. Maybe you simply need a nurse to come in the following morning, but you need to know that somebody is listening to you, that somebody cares, that somebody has your issues in mind and not just the patient, because it's the caregiver that makes the decisions, that pulls the trigger. And especially in all of this dementia and chronic illness, it isn't the patient that picks up the phone and makes the appointment. It isn't a third party. It's the caregiver. So if the caregiver is supported, if the caregiver is knowledgeable, if the caregiver feels that they're being respected, that they're being listened to, that somebody has their best interests in mind, and that's exactly what this care integrator role performs, then we all know that an educated and a supported caregiver is calmer. If they're calmer, the patient is calmer. An educated caregiver makes wiser decisions. They understand what their options are, and they can make the best choice with what they have in front of them and have the peace of mind that they've done the best they can with what they have. They have somebody who's there when the best laid plans of the last 30 days all of a sudden go upside down because there's a crisis that may not be a medical crisis. It could be a family crisis in a different direction. It could be a financial issue. It could be transportation. It could be a myriad of things. And when you've got somebody like the care integrator that you can pick up the phone, it's like having a mini support group. And this care integrator can go on in terms of understanding the caregiver and begin to bring, we don't have enough support groups being run out there. We can't afford to let a month go between the time that caregivers are allowed to get together, be heard, vent, feel that without invading their confidentiality, that there's a way that they can be helped. Believe me, I know my caregivers, and if they could meet twice a week or 3 times a week, they would. All right? So once a month doesn't work. And unless we start training people that understand the dynamics of non-clinical family caregiving, taught from somebody who's been doing it for 27, 28 years, and that's one of the programs that is fully developed, that we're now in the process of breaking out into workshops that can be done in 10, 15, 20-hour units, so that those folks that want to begin a real career path and deal with the caregiver and not just be part of the fee-for-service or the bundled clinical reimbursement will have an opportunity to grow it out. Because unless we have an army of people willing to support the caregiver, we have nothing going forward, because they are the backbone the front line and the whole backfield for care. Stop and think about it. What would happen, and you've heard me say this before and in the past, what would happen if tomorrow morning 3 million of, let's just say 50 million caregivers got up and said, you know what, I'm burned out, I can't do this any longer, I quit, American clinical system, you take over. What would we do? Where would we find 3 million people at the drop of a hat to substitute for the wonderful American family caregiver? We couldn't. The system would go into such a state of disarray because no matter how many paid caregivers there might be out there, who's paying them? Who's putting them in the house? How do they know what's really going on? All right, it would be such disruption to everything that we know that it is incumbent upon us, both the government, the people, everybody that's involved in where we are in our cycle of life at this particular point in time, must understand that almost 1 in every 5 people in America today is a caregiver with no training, no support, no idea of how long it's going to go on, how they're going to do it. And we, at a minimum, owe them the responsibility because we will all be caregivers. We either have been, doing it now, see it coming, because at the drop of a hat, as my good friend Gary Barg said the other day, who is today's caregiver, and he said, when that phone rings and all of a sudden, tag, you're it, your loved one fell, mom's been diagnosed, unfortunately your son was in an accident and now has a cerebral vascular insult because he fell off the scooter and didn't have a helmet on, or whatever, the myriad of things that create caregivers happen. What are you going to do? Are you prepared? Have you any idea of what the responsibilities are? I would say that nobody really does know in advance. And even if you've seen it, even if you've watched your family or yourself do for grandma, what you did for grandma is different than what you have to do for grandpa. And it's certainly different what you have to do for a spouse, do for your children. So understand that caregiving comes in every form and shape that it's possible to imagine. And that at some point you're going to be called upon, like it or not. I don't care how wealthy you are or how poor you are. You're going to wind up being a caregiver, and you're going to wind up having to deal with the responsibility, the role, and what it is that's going to happen to your loved one. And believe me, the facilities in this country cannot support the amount of people that are being cared for under the roofs of the American economy and the American vast households that are out there. Could you imagine if we needed another 3 million nursing home beds tomorrow, or 3 million assisted living beds, to take on the responsibility of only 3 million caregivers who said, I quit, I can't do it, I'm through? Think about the magnitude of that. Think about the responsibility. And you'll understand why things like this care integrator are so important going forward, and why somebody who's been involved in this for 28 years is focusing on how do we maintain the vitality, the vibrancy, the capability of the American family caregiver, the backbone of healthcare, the front line of everything that's going on in an aging world. If you stop and think about that, you'll understand the magnitude of what America is facing. It's not a pill. It's not a treatment. It happens to be what we are responsible to do for our loved ones. And we better figure out a way that we can make the family caregiver more competent, more capable, and more able to do the role that they didn't sign up for. But every one of them is standing there doing it, but reinventing the wheel every day. So when I say to you, I would love to hear from you at info@caregiverreality.com. If you want to see a program like this go forward, if you want to see the dynamics of learning and understanding more about what is the biggest, not only health, but social and moral issue that we have going on in America today and the world, then take a step back. Go look at the Wall Street Journal today. They don't put things on the cover of the Wall Street Journal unless it has some semblance of significance. They're not trying to make a morality statement. They have simply realized, as so many others, be it the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever the media is, Twitter, tweet, everywhere you turn, the caregiver is trying to make themselves heard, is pleading, is saying, help me. What do I do? Where do I turn? Who's going to help? And it just can't be solved with dollars. It has to be solved with skills and training and capability so that you can learn how to cope in your own way with the situation that you have. Every caregiving situation is like a fingerprint. It's unique. Well, you've heard me say it over and over again, week after week. It's family, it's dynamics, it's financial, it's geography, it's a million ingredients that all come together. And each one requires a unique glove to fit over that hand and make that fingerprint have meaning and to be able to understand. And many of you are dealing with it in more than just one situation. I have caregivers that are caring for a mother, a spouse, and a special needs child, or a special needs older adult with who's had issues since they were younger. Can you imagine being a caregiver to 3 people at the same time? Think about it. It's hard enough when it's one. All right? This is what we face in America. We cannot let the system crumble. And the system is you, the American family caregiver. I cannot emphasize that enough. As we get down to the last few minutes, as I said, I'm deeply indebted to Freddie, my producer, for giving me the opportunity to come out here and talk to the American public. It's been a personal joy to me to be able to have the opportunity to speak, to educate, and try and share what I've learned personally, what I've learned professionally. My book will be published, it's been out for a while, but a major publisher has picked it up so that I hope that all of you will, at some point when you need it, be able to pick up the Caregiver Practical Problem-Solving Manual. It's not how I took care of my wife or my mom, who I did, or my dad. It's how do you approach the whole subject of caregiving? What do you need to know? Why do you need the Scott Solkoffs? Why do you need to be able to plan in advance? What do you need to know about end of life? Why is hospice so important? Not just because it's end of life, and certainly the discussion about hospice could never be called death panels. When we don't like things, we make up terrible labels for them. Hospice is one of the most innovative, respected capabilities that we have in this country. And both for end of life and palliative, I constantly refer to them with clients that need a second opinion. They're always there. They're skilled, they're competent, they're an integral part of the system. If everything worked as well as hospice did, we wouldn't have many of the issues that we have today. And so, South Florida, America, and the world, as I sit here tonight, don't think I'm trying to be maudlin or redundant. I have been thrilled with the opportunity to bring you what little that I know and what I try and understand about what's happening out there so that you can hopefully make, as I said, wiser decisions, take better care of your families, but most importantly, take good care of yourselves. Because if the caregiver fails, then what do we have? We not only have their loved one or the patient, whichever you want to call it, who's ill. Now we have a caregiver who not only can't support what's going on in the home, but needs care themselves. Where will that come from? Who will pay for it? How do we even know what's out there? We don't. And we all have a responsibility to one another to recognize that in this day and age, this aging world that we live in, that no matter how good the medical profession is, it's the family that we have to rely upon. So, America, South Florida, and the world, I'm going to take a little time to rebound myself. I'm looking forward to coming back and bringing you an even more dynamic show. And thank you to everybody that's been a help and a part of it all along the way. And take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you real soon. Good night.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver reality show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com and find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.